Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Crispin, and welcome to this week's session. And we're going to be studying and discussing chapters 5 and 6, International Business, in our International Business book. And that will be on Introduction to International Business, Culture, and Trade. So let's get started. We've got a lot to cover tonight. Well, tonight, again, as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at chapters 5 and 6 in our text. And we're going to be focusing on international culture and trade. We did an introduction to international trade last week, and this week we're going to focus on both international culture and dive a little bit deeper in international trade. And we're going to review how there are differences between culture and trade dynamics and how that shapes the global business strategies. So I want you to think about real world examples as we go through these slides, and that way it could be more meaningful for you. So these are the two chapters, international culture and international trade. And we'll cover the key concepts from both chapters, and we'll be using the framework and case studies. Actually, not case studies, but we're going to dive a little deeper in Hofstede's example about international culture dynamics to help managers deal with local cultures that may be different from their own. So we're going to understand culture and global business, cultural frameworks and impacts. And in chapter 6, we'll discuss further some of the theories and patterns that we discussed earlier broadly in our first week, and also trade policies and barriers. Now, chapter 5 emphasizes culture as a critical factor in international business. And I'd like to highlight how cultural differences affect MNEs, multinational corporations, and their decisions. Their decisions can range from marketing to employee management, and both are very important to the firm. The textbook does focus on culture's impact on the firm and performance and societal interactions. And we have an example of IKEA. There's a case in the textbook to illustrate how firms adapt to cultural preferences, such as smaller furniture for Asian markets. And think about other brands that you might have seen adapt globally. So culture shapes business practices, negotiations, and consumer behavior. It influences multinational enterprises, or MNEs, strategies and performance. And it provides key challenges, macro communication, cultural misunderstandings, things that can really take a business and run it off course. Another example, again, we'll see about IKEA. So we're emphasizing the role of shaping business environments, and culture is not static. It evolves with globalization, as noted in chapter 5, and language barriers or religious practices can impact business operations. So think about some examples that you may have encountered of cultural differences and how they were encountered in professional or personal settings, and try to see how that can be relatable to what we're studying. There are shared values, beliefs, norms, and behaviors of a society. It's up to you, the manager, who is not from that society, to understand what they are. This will influence decision-making, communication, and management styles, because you might have to adapt a style or adopt a style that that you would not uh, have in your home country, just so that it will match what is required or necessary in the visiting country. And so there are key dimensions such as language, religion, social norms, education. And finally, culture is dynamic. It's evolving uh, constantly, and social media has caused it to evolve even much more quickly, making original cultural distinctions sort of a little blurry. And with that, we want to explore Hofstede's framework, which is a key tool in Chapter 5 for analyzing cultural differences. And they each has a dimension to it, as shown here: power, distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty, avoidance, and long-term orientation. And these, if you're in an Asian country, uh, it could be, you could, for instance, it can apply to businesses, high power distance, which would be in some Asian countries, that affect management styles. And again, performing a management style in your host country that you would not normally adapt in your home country. So let's look a little further, dive a little deeper into Hofstede's cultural dimensions in international business. And this is important because in the end, it is those functional workers that are managed uh, that enable the firm to be productive and to reach their set goals. And you as a manager or leader are responsible or would be responsible for those functional workers and that outpost to meet their set goals. And that can only be done if everyone works together and pulls and harness together. And therefore, it's up to you as a manager to make sure that you understand the local culture and adapt and shape your management and leadership style accordingly. And so this will, for a few moments here, explore how these dimensions help multinational enterprises, MNEs, navigate cultural differences in global business. And so think about real world applications again as we go through these slides. In Chapter 5, we are introduced to Hofstede's framework, and its origins are in IBM's global workforce study of a few decades ago. And it provides a structured way to compare culture and their impact on business practices. So our textbook places emphasis on its use for M&Es in strategy and operations. So what is Hofstede's cultural dimensions framework? Well, again, it was developed by Geert Hofstede, a Danish professional, to analyze cultural differences. And based on the IBM study across 70 plus countries. And they discovered that there were 6 dimensions to measure cultural values. And this helps in turn the multinationals understand societal influences on business, again, making it more feasible to communicate to their functional employees what is necessary so that they can be deliberate and have them all pull together towards the common set goal. Here are the 6 dimensions: power, distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term versus short-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. Each dimension measures a specific cultural value that influences business behavior. So we're going to explore each dimension in detail over the next few slides. So you'll get a better understanding of what it's all about. And when you read about it, then in the text, you'll have a firmer grasp of how valuable this tool can be. First of all is power distance. And it emphasizes how power distance shapes workplace hierarchies. And in doing so, um, for example, Malaysia's high power distance leading to top-down management versus Denmark's collaborative approach. So these are two totally different approaches, but very valid in their respective locales. And so it's important to understand what is what is going on there, and which type of power distance that is going on, so that you can adapt your management and leadership style accordingly. So a high power distance, like in Malaysia, would be hierarchical, centralized authority. And like Denmark, a low power distance would be egalitarian and participative. Everybody gets a say. And at the top, everybody waits for the leader to say. So in Malaysia. So business impact, well, it affects management styles and decision making. Individualism versus collectivism. Uh, individualistic cultures prioritize personal achievement, while collectivist ones value group harmony. And a couple of examples are USA versus China. Gee, I wonder which one is which. Individualism is focused on personal goals and independence, while collectivism is emphasized on group loyalty and interdependence. For instance, if you were going to reward a team in the USA, you would set numerical goals and possibly prize money for the winner of the highest scores that you put together. Conversely, that would not play very well in China, so you would have a group score of which team won, and the team would be recognized publicly, and they wouldn't go and give them the same type of prize winnings or anything like that that you would receive or expect in the USA. So it's a great way to make sure that you don't humble, embarrass the workers or take away their spirit by understanding the type of performance framework that they're working within. So the impact would mean influences teamwork and marketing strategies in a way that the employees can understand. And collectivist cultures prefer group-oriented promotions, like we mentioned about China. Masculinity versus femininity. This is not about boy versus girl. This is more about masculine culture prioritize competition and feminine ones value collaboration. And so in a masculine competitive culture like Japan, that would be achievement-driven values, whereas a feminine culture like in Sweden, again, cooperative, quality of life focus. And it's no accident that Sweden and Denmark are fairly close and have similar types of approaches to their performance structures. So the business impact would be it shapes organizational culture and reward systems, again, to match the two with the type of competitive or cooperation tool or guidelines that's required. Masculine cultures emphasize performance bonuses. Uncertainty avoidance. It's covered in Chapter 5, and it's how uncertainty avoidance cultures prefer clear rules, while low uncertainty avoidance ones embrace flexibility. So high uncertainty avoidance structured, rule-driven would be Greece, and low uncertainty avoidance would be flexible, innovative, would be Singapore. And we've seen Singapore really grow quickly over the last 50, 60 years since it's come into its own independent nation, versus Greece that has just been sort of stumbling along and, being very, going through different types of governments and so forth, of top-down governments. So the business impact would be it affects risk management and innovation strategies. In Singapore, it's a hotbed of innovation, particularly in the banking industry. In fact, it would like to become the center of the banking industry with this new phase of AI and banking and digital communication. Long-term versus short-term orientation. This is an example of how long-term oriented cultures prioritize sustainability, and short-term ones focus on quick wins. And the long-term, future-focused persistence are countries like South Korea. And it's no coincidence that Asian countries would have a more long-term, future-focused orientation. Shorter term, tradition, immediate results, something like Nigeria. Nigeria is a combination of some think opposites. It's a high growth, very wealthy, and at the same time very poor. It's very dynamic and roiling in its capitalist structure and innovation, and it seems like everybody is hustling there to do the best they can. And so that would make for the short-term traditional and immediate results very important. The business impact would be influences strategic planning and investment decisions and how those would be accomplished. The long term would be cultures prioritize R&D investment, delaying today what can be discovered and implemented tomorrow. Indulgence versus restraint. Again, indulgent cultures prioritize enjoyment, while restrained ones emphasize control. Well, emphasize leisure, personal freedom, Mexico. And restraint would be norms and disciplines such as Russia. Two cultures could not be farther apart than Mexico and Russia. And the business impact would be it affects consumer behavior and workplace policies. And an example would be indulgent cultures favor experiential marketing. So that would be a real good guide for managers in those types of indulgent countries. Applying Hofstede's dimensions to business. IKEA, for example, is where products are adapted to cultural preferences. For instance, smaller furniture in Japan, and dimensions guide HR and negotiations. So these dimensions are very important and critical to understand, so that managers again can be deliberate about their leadership instead of violating local mores and cultures, causing dissension and dissatisfaction and confusion amongst workers. So marketing tailor campaigns to cultural values, such as collectivist ads in Asia, and in HR, adapt leadership to power distance masculinity and femininity, and in negotiations, adjust to uncertainty avoidance, communication styles. And an example, again, IKEA's localized product designs in different markets. Another product design, I just finished these, are Oreo cream sandwiches. They're one of the world's most beloved cookies, but yet they are packaged differently in many countries across the world to match the local country needs and requirements. For instance, in this country, in the United States, where we have lots of pantry space, you could buy big packs of cookies, but in other countries that are warm and have high humidity, and goods can not spoil, but they can become stale. They sell, and they have smaller storage areas. They sell packaging of the cookies in smaller packages, again, to accommodate the local needs. And so that may require more trips to the market, but because they have smaller storage space for food anyway, they're going to make lots of trips to the market. So that makes sense, and it fits right in with their cultural ways. Some of the challenges of applying Hofstede's framework, and again, it's no complete panacea, but there's a risk of stereotyping or outdated data, and things, as I mentioned, are moving very quickly, in many cases driven by social media and the world connected digitally by way of the internet. So it means that we are more connected with each other than we ever have been. In the past, we were separated by geographical uh, barriers and oceans, and therefore cultures tended to grow up individually in their own areas. Now, cultures being connected worldwide are being influenced by those cultures far from their shores, and uh, and so that is causing them to evolve in a way that is not consistent all the time with Hofstede's original framework. So recognizing that things are dynamic means the prudent and smart multinational manager is going to pay close attention to what is really happening locally with the preliminary learning of, of applying Hofstede's framework. And then going one step further and saying, what are the differentiations and exceptions here that I need to pay attention to that are unique to this local area in which we're managing others. So what are some strategies for cultural competence? Well, training and partnerships. That's very important. Building cultural competence with Hofstede's cultural training, educate employees on dimensions. Have awareness is the first step towards real learning and pulling together of a team, is to be aware of the differences and recognize what those differences mean. And that's the first step towards building a cohesive team. Local partnerships, uh, because again, Hofstede and cultures are fluid and dynamic. Local knowledge is critical. So that is important to be able to adapt even further with local knowledge. Diverse teams incorporate varied cultural perspectives. Yes, the idea is there needs to be every brain in the game, and therefore, no matter what cultural background, accept the fact that everyone has something to offer. And your challenge as a manager is to how to get that from them in a way that is more natural for them rather than for you. As a manager, you can adapt to what they're trying to say, and so that you can understand them better and then implement whatever great ideas that you get from the diverse team. So an example of this would be Unilever's cross-cultural training programs. It's an international company, and it has products all over the world, and therefore it needs to make sure that its managers and leaders and employees are culturally sensitive to wherever they are, and also recognize that some of their products may be used in some countries that were not intended, but yet they are very successful in those countries because they've adapted them to certain cultural norms. So what's the conclusion? Um, Hofstede's dimensions help MNEs or multinational enterprises adapt to cultural contexts, but they require careful application. So use this framework in your projects, in your DQs and assignments to analyze a firm's strategies. And if you have any questions about that, you can bring them up or let me know. Hofstede's dimensions guide M&Es in navigating cultural differences. It has impacts on marketing and HR and um, and negotiations and strategy. Very important to the firm and its growth. Uh, Apply Hofstede's framework to whatever your not necessarily your final project, but your next upcoming assignments and DQs. And if you have examples that you can share them in your responses. There's another framework that we're not going to get into here today, but it's in your chapter 5. It's called Trumpenars and Globe Framework, and it complements Hofstede's model, and it focuses on relationships versus rules, or Globe's leadership insights help M&Es navigate cultural complexities. So um, there's an emphasis on high context, for example, Japan versus low context, USA, cultures to illustrate communication differences. And this is, again, another complementary tool to Hofstede. So culture does influence M&E strategies, again, as outlined in Chapter 5. It influences how firms adapt marketing. For instance, McDonald's offering rice-based meals in Asia. We don't see that in this country. There are HR challenges like adapting leadership styles to collective cultures, collectivist cultures. And there is a risk of cultural missteps, and such as failed product launches due to cultural insensitivity. And there are a number of examples of those throughout the world, and some of them are pretty humorous. So in marketing, tailoring products to cultural preferences. In HR, adapting management styles to local norms, and that might mean behavior that is totally different than we have here in the United States, but is accepted. Negotiations, adjusting to cultural communication styles. Again, in India, never try to shake hands with your left hand because that's a taboo. So you shake hands with your right hand, and that doesn't cause embarrassment. Risks are cultural missteps, can lead to brand damage or failed expansions. Again, it's all about people and their expectations and what challenges or problems can you help them solve. And if they look to you as a transparent, viable problem solver entity, then you will find that you'll have much more success. Other challenges are such as language barriers or ethical difficulties, such as gifts and gift giving norms in some cultures. No matter where we are in the world, the United States is bound by the laws of the United States. So if bribes and that are seen, gift giving, which would be seen as bribes in this country, are seen as gifts in another country, they are not acceptable in that country by U.S. firms. So you have to abide by the laws of this land if you are a company from this country. If you're a company from another country, an M&E from another country, you will still want to abide by your country's laws, but understand to what extent that is required. Here in this country, it is very strict. Other countries may not be so strict. There can be ethical dilemmas, varying cultural views on business practices, and the antidote to that is cultural training with local partnerships and diversity in teams. Demonstrating that you see your host country employees and members as people too, people with cultures and feelings, and understand what they are so that you can interact and engage with them on a level that they appreciate and understand. Now, moving on to Chapter 6, we've talked in Chapter 5 about culture sets the context for global business interactions, and trade drives economic integration and M&E operations. And again, trade is interaction between two entities and people, so they need to understand each other so they can trade. And coming up, Chapter 6 explores trade theories, policies, and their impacts on firms. And we'll dive into that a little bit further. We'll get started anyway, and we'll see how far we get. Why does international trade matter? Well, it matters because trade exchange of goods and services across borders can enrich each country that is part of the trading process. And we have things like economic growth and M&E strategies that reference concepts like comparative advantage and economies of scale. And we talked about that in our first week, and so I won't go too much into detail about it now. But some drivers for economic growth are competitiveness and M&E strategies. And the strategies that an M&E is going to create is going to be a strategy that it sees will best enable its deliberate growth to achieve set goals. And some of those key drivers are comparative advantage, market access, and economies of scale. And an example would be a global supply chains for electronics. Again, the Apple iPhone 16 camera has 30 separate supply chains to feed it the necessary parts to assemble it in the factory. So supply chains can be very complex, and each one has a human in the process somewhere making decisions that need to be appealed to. So there are some key trade theories: Adam Smith's absolute advantage, Ricardo's comparative advantage, and Heckler Oland's theory focuses on the endowments and how new trade theory accounts for scale and differentiation. So these are some of the things that we're going to encounter in Chapter 6 that'll be helpful for you in your DQs. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you all for your indulgence, and we are onward and upward. I'm very impressed with all of the assignments that you and DQs that you've been submitting. I'll be grading the week 2 assignments in the next day or two, and so you'll get your feedback on that. And it's onward and upward. So remember, I'll see you in class. Good night, everybody. Thanks for your indulgence and participation.